Well, good afternoon, folks. It sounds like you have all had an amazing program, and I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker. Richard Moore has been a trailblazer and a luminary in the quest for environmental justice, having dedicated his talents and leadership to this cause over the course of decades. Currently the co-coordinator of the Los Jardines Institute, a direct service organization based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and national co-coordinator of the Environmental Justice Health Alliance for Chemical Policy Reform, Richard has developed leadership and expertise at every level of the EJ movement, from the fields to the halls of Congress and the White House. Richard has played a leadership role in some of the most consequential institutions that intersect Latino advocacy and environmental policy, having served as the executive director of the Southwest Network for Environmental and Economic Justice, and shaping new models of community organizing as the former lead organizer with the Southwest Organizing Project. While his contributions to environmental justice advocacy on the ground in communities across the United States has been profound and significant, Richard has also been in the driver's seat to shape a resurgent focus by federal policymakers on environmental justice policy and legislation. Richard currently serves as a key advisor to my boss, Natural Resources Chairman Raul Grijalva, on his environmental justice working group. He's a key figure in a national effort to shape climate policy through the Equitable and Just National Climate Platform, and he is the co-chair of the Biden-Harris administration's White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. Familia Green Latinos, it's my great honor and privilege to introduce to you my friend, Richard Moore.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Chris, very much for that introduction. I just wanted to bring greetings from Los Jardines Institute. As many of you are knowledgeable of, we're based here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so what I wanted to do is just to frame a couple of things for us as we kind of move through these short comments that I want to make. You know, I had been thinking over the last several days, if not longer, in terms of the 50s and the 60s, and for those sisters and brothers that have been engaged in struggle and movement for many, many years, not only here in New Mexico, but throughout the Southwest, throughout the country, and throughout the world. And I was reflecting for a minute on Dr. Martin Luther King, and I say that because, as many of you are aware, that Dr. King called for mobilization in Washington, D.C. in the 60s. And it's referred to as the Poor People's Campaign. And right before the campaign took place and we all moved from throughout the country to Washington, Dr. King was assassinated. And so I reflect on that because when we returned back, I was involved then in a youth organization here in Albuquerque and in New Mexico. And when we came back from Washington, our elders, both women and men elders, some that were on the caravan to Washington, and others that were not, and we were asked to come to northern New Mexico, to a very small rural community in the north, and to work collectively in a potato cooperative. And you know, a lot of times, you know, putting your hands in that soil, working side by side with our sisters and brothers, we're there to work, but there's a lot of discussions, obviously, that take place at the same time. And we were asked to come for 3.5 days. And so out of that then came 3.5 days later, the elders had asked us, because in the evenings with bonfires and guitars and singing and sharing and so on, the elders convened the night before that we were leaving, and they said, young sisters and brothers, with all respect, nothing is free in this country. And so what we've been doing together today and these last several days is not free either. And I remember several of us looking at each other and saying, if they're going to be talking about any money, we ain't got none. And so we knew basically that was not what was about to be said to us. But I say because our elders ask us to always remember three things. And that's the beginning of the comment that I would like to make at this moment. And the elders said, never forget where you came from. Always remember whose shoulders you stand on, and always give back to others what's been given to you. And that's the life for many of us that have been involved in both the Chicano movement and various movements throughout this period of time. That's what we're all about. That's what we've been practicing, what has been asked of us. And so I say that to you as we kind of move forward with some of this history, because Los Sardinas Institute is a grassroots environmental and economic justice organization. We're farmers here. We have an agricultural program. Some of our youth, some of our volunteer youth are in the fields as we speak. And so within our agricultural program, we run a farm. We're a community-based farm. The first cut of our produce goes to our people. And then additionally to that, we co-founded with others, a farmers cooperative here in the South Valley of Albuquerque. And there's over 30 farms that are members of our farmers cooperative. So we do have contracts with Albuquerque Public Schools, with hospitals, Presbyterian Hospital, University of New Mexico Hospital, and so on. And then the second part of our work has really been environmental and economic justice, the intersections between environmental and economic justice. And so based on that, then we have a literacy program. We house the Libre Traficante Underground Library here on the farm. And the books in the library are the books that many may remember that in Tucson, Arizona, when they banned the Mexican-American Studies program in the Tucson public schools, they also banned a whole set of books. And I'm making reference to that. So we get together and we read illegal books, banned books. And so let's never forget, sisters and brothers, that in 1950, the first banned film in the United States was filmed in Silver City, New Mexico, Salt of the Earth. And let's always remember where we come from and the history that's connected to where we come from, where we are, and where we're going. So our third program then is our children's and youth program. It's all integrated into the other areas of work that we do. But moving along quickly, I think it's also important, and I think Secretary Holland touched on this a little bit, and I just want to flag this, that in terms of the environmental and economic justice movement, some may know that in 1991, we held the first National Environmental Leadership Forum in Washington, D.C. That's very crucial in terms of all the connectedness to our history, because we redefined environmentalism and conservationism as where we live, where we work, where we play, where we pray, and where we go to school and where we learn. That's the piece of the combinations of work that opened and broadened the definition of conservationism and environmentalism. And so some would say that, well, you know, that you folks have never been involved in conservation issues, or you've never been involved in environmental issues. And we remind in terms of our history that the connection between climate change and global warming and environmental and economic justice should not be siloed, because climate change is environmental and economic justice, and the health justices and the rest of the pieces that are connected to that. I think one of the other key pieces that came out of the first People of Color Summit that I want to lift up for a minute was, as African Americans, Latinos, Native Indigenous people, and Asian Pacific Islanders, this was a People of Color Summit. And so based upon that, then the struggles, in some cases that we've had with each other throughout these years, And so in leaving, before we got to Washington, D.C., and in leaving, we bonded ourselves together and said that we would never allow ourselves, whether it's government institutions or any other institutions, to pit us against each other. And as we move forward and these continuation of these moments of history, then that has to be, we need to note that, and we have to watch that very, very closely, the building of coalitions and the sense of urgency of doing that. Now, I'm also, as I move on and keep it brief, want to remind us, some of us need to be reminded, and will continue to remind ourselves as we go through this path and work together. One, I think that's crucial, is that we as Latinos, Latinas in this country will never allow ourselves to become the invisible population. The struggles of our ancestors, our elders, to put the issues of Latinos on the table as much as any of the other issues of any other groups throughout this country. That's very, very important, sisters and brothers, for us to understand, is that we will not allow ourselves to become an invisible population. So I say that because then part of the importance of what we've been doing, and we work on local policy, we work on state policy, we work on national policy, and as we say, from the bottom up process, that everything that is grounded in the ground, that our people need to be present at every table where decisions are being made about our health, safety, well-being, land, resources, or whatever that may be. So we need to make sure that we're equipped when we go to those tables, and those connections between trainings and looking at energy issues and this kind of thing. I remember going to a meeting at one point in Washington, and that one of the presenters said that, well, we're not here today to discuss climate change. We're here today to discuss environmental justice. So I'm restating that because of the sense of urgency for us to understand those connectedness. And lastly, with a couple of other, I think, very, very important points, I think the Green Latinos play a major role in terms of what's happening, what can be happening, and what we can do together. And one of the other themes that came out of the first People of Color Summit was that we speak for ourselves. And what I will say to you, with all respect, is that systemic racism is the issue, and environmental and economic justice is the goal. And so some many times don't understand that systemic racism in policy, in decision-making, in participation, and all the other pieces that were put together, in some cases to keep the foot, or to keep our hand on the foot or under the foot. And so the role then, market-based solutions, when we're looking at cap and trade, a whole series of market-based solutions, incineration, I mean, on and on and on with the issues. Those are not solutions if we're looking at systemic racism and the health impacts of our sisters and brothers, not only farm workers that have been working for generations upon generations, or for those of us that live around or close to, are poisoned by the air, the land, and our water, and the connection between that. So I say this to all that are listening to this session this morning. Let's never forget where we came from. Let's always remember whose shoulders we stand on, those that have given up their lives to make it possible for us to be even on this activity today. And always, sisters and brothers, give back to others what's been given to us. So let's ground ourselves in history. Let's ground ourselves in celebration. Let's ground ourselves in unity, and let's work side by side, not in the front or not in the back, but side by side by coming to solutions to many of these issues. So, Brother Chris, I appreciate the introduction. Again, I'd like to thank the Green Latinos for the invitation to allow me, in behalf of our membership, to speak today. And in closing, let's never forget where we came from. Let's always remember whose shoulders we stand on, and let's always give back to others what's been given to us. So I'm going to pass it back on. I just again want to thank the leadership of the Green Latinos for allowing us this moment. It's not about I. We spend less time dealing with the I and more time dealing with the we. So I have never done anything by myself, and anything that we've been a part of over the last myself, over close to 56 years now, has been done by people, and we've done it together in consultation to those that are most disproportionately and highly impacted. Chris, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to pass it back to you.
Thank you so much for that, Richard. I really want to offer the opportunity to the participants of this summit to ask questions of you, to take the opportunity to leverage your experience and wisdom. So please put your questions in the chat as we continue to have this dialogue. And I will start with a question of my own, Richard. And I heard a lot of really powerful themes in your comments. I heard the importance of coalition building. I heard the importance of grounding ourselves in our heritage, in our past, and ensuring that our voices are at the table when key decisions are being made. You have a unique vantage point in your role with the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, and in your role as an advisor to several members of Congress. I would ask you, at this moment that we find ourselves in, what would you say to the Green Latinos membership are some of the more pressing policy matters that we need to focus on over the course of this next year? And how can communities across the country plug into those efforts as you see it, Richard?
Okay, and thank you for that question. I think one of those issues is around the EJ for All Act, and I know there will be further discussions that will take place and engaging with others around this. So I don't want to dive deep into that, but the EJ for All Act is crucial because many of the issues that we've been talking about are community of impact, where we have several facilities located in our community. When permitting and other activity takes place, either in terms of the federal government or county, city, or state government, then they look at one problem at a time based on the permit. So cumulative impact is extremely important to that, and the EJ for All Act is crucial to that piece. So I want to encourage our sisters and brothers to do and to work side by side with us in terms of moving the EJ for All Act forward. There's others that we know that in some cases are on hold, but what I will say and lift up the question of voter suppression, and so on, and that we have existing bills even here in New Mexico, but throughout this country, and so we need to encourage our people to register and get out the vote. And so then there's a series of other ones. Build Back Better. We know that Build Back Better is on hold. We have to putting in a nice frame. Build Back Better is on hold for the minute. I think the secretary made reference to the infrastructure bill, and so much of that money has hit the states. We need to make sure that those resources are going into rural communities and into urban Latino communities along with that. And then the other one, Chris, just to flag, is Justice 40. We've been engaged, as you know, with the president pre-election. The president made particular commitments around environmental justice. And so now we need to see some of those commitments hit the ground. And so that also then obviously involves the House and the Senate in terms of moving things forward. Justice 40, we said if we're going to talk about 40% of the investments going back to the most highly disproportionately impacted people, then put the justice on the 40. And that's why it's called now Justice 40. And we need to keep our elected officials and others accountable. And we need to stay at the table for making those decisions. Those are some examples, Chris.
Excellent. And I know you've been entrenched in a lot of that work. We do have a question from the audience. Juan de Clep Bereto asks, Richard, what can we do in large, well-funded national organizations like UCS and others to bring scientific, analytical, and policy recommendation resources to the real solutions and move away from market-based solutions that EJ folks rightly decry as false solutions? What is the role of the mainstream environmental movement, both in partnership with EJ organizations and as part of the ecosphere of creating environmental justice policy?
Okay, well, again, thank you for that question. What I will say is that one, we need to consistently look back at our history. And the reason I'm saying that is I'm making particular reference to a letter that was sent to the green groups over 30 years ago now, asking for the green groups to bring their leadership to the table with some of our leadership and to discuss not only what we can't work on and why we can't do it and the impacts on our community, but then on the other side, the success side of that is what we can do together. And so I'm flagging that that's a piece of the Equitable Just National Climate Platform and the forum, the Equitable and Just National Climate Forum, where some of the green groups and some of our leadership within the environmental justice movement have sat at the table for over 3 years now and done just absolutely incredible work together. And I would encourage folks to really to read and so on the Equitable and Just National Climate Platform. That was a follow-up from our opinion on the principles of environmental justice. And so when you look at that, that includes relocation, dislocation, gentrification, education, I mean, you name it, and that's what we've been working on, and that's been a very, very successful, and UCC has been at the table around those particular issues. So, and then the question of resources, you know, we're always the most under-resourced, and so we've been doing some successful work, I will say, that in terms of some of the green groups and others, philanthropy and others, that say that you have to resource the most highly impacted. And if we're truly talking about building a movement from the bottom up, then the local groups and local communities and organizations have to be resourced to not only to do the work that's necessary, but to be at the tables that we're talking about.
Excellent. Continuing on that theme of coalition building and movement building, Tyke James asks, how do we rebuild solidarity after harm occurs within the movement? How do we, do you have any stories or anecdotes of how those bridges get rebuilt so that we can continue advocating together?
And again, that's a very important question. I think for many of us that it's really about building, part of it is really about building powerful grassroots, trained organizations, because we're really talking about building power. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. So I think that's piece of it. Now, I do have to say, additionally, in response to that, we have always been about, because what our elders said, that in order to build movement, you need to build an intergenerational movement. And so the young folks that are part of this today and so on, and we're about building an intergenerational movement. And that includes our children, our youth, our young adults, our adults, and our elders. And really lifting that power up from the bottom. And so as we do that, then we can continue to make, there's been many, many gains made throughout these many, many years. And so in order to do that and to build movement, then we need to build the intersections back and forth. And I think additionally, Chris, just to say this, many of our urban communities are at the table a lot of times, but But we need to make sure that our sisters and brothers from rural communities are engaged in this process. And this is part of the work that we're doing also, not only here in New Mexico, but throughout the country, making sure that our rural sisters and brothers are included in exactly what we're talking about. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I think that's been one of my personal takeaways working with you over the years, Richard, is understanding how important that interconnectivity is, and how important the principle of allowing environmental justice communities to speak for themselves really is. On that note, Marissa Rodriguez asks, how do you recommend getting more educated, learning more about these topics? Are there resources or information that you can point us to that would help in that?
I mean, there is, and one of the things that I'll say is that here at Los Jardines, we're primarily an all volunteer organization, although that I'm one of the co-coordinators of Los Jardines, and Sofia Martinez is the other co-coordinator. We're both volunteer co-coordinators. And then we have our youth that are engaged and so on. And we've made an intentional decision that we wouldn't accept county, city, state, or federal funding because we don't want to be locked into anybody else's agenda except what the people's agenda is. And so that's been a struggling moment. So why do we have Los Jardines, the Gardens Institute? So we're doing workshops on Justice 40. We're engaging in discussions around our history. We're bringing our elders to the table to keep reminding and sharing their knowledge. We're bringing our young people to the table because at the same time, in our youth, because at the same time, the intersectionness of that, it's about building family. And that's one of the strengths of Latino families, is so that we need to have the whole family to the table at some level or the other. And I will just say, besides that, women have always played a major role, not only in the environmental and economic justice movement, grassroots organizations, and our women need to be given the proper due and hold the same respect that many men in leadership positions are. So I just have to kind of flag that. So there is other places. I would encourage those to look at a publication that was done in 1976 called 450 Years of Chicano History and Photos, and another book that came out later on that was edited and we worked with as one of my mentors, Elizabeth Betita Martinez, 500 Years of Chicana History and in Photos. And so I just don't want to go into this, but when we were sitting around the table brainstorming what we need to do around educating ourselves, and one of the elders said at one point, when you visit a family is one of the first things that happen when we go into, the elders will bring out photos. They'll bring out photos and with us hanging with our diaper hanging sideways, whatever it was, some of them. So it was photos. So that's why we did a photo book. So there is the other places is the Environmental Justice Health Alliance. We have partnered with the Regenesis Institute out of South Carolina to do a lot of the training. And then the other one, Chris, just to say it, is SEED, the Center for Earth, Energy, and Democracy, that's based out of Minnesota. And so there's a lot of that interconnectedness that we can help each other guide us to where we need to be getting some of the stuff we're talking about.
Excellent, Richard. And another question, in terms of intergenerational connectedness, how do you see the different generations coming together and working on these issues? Is there space for collaboration between young millennials and some of the elders of the EJ movement? And what does that look like to you?
And that again is a very, very important question. That's why even here at Los Jardines, one of our major efforts here is with our children. Particularly the 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, because our elders reminded us if we want to educate ourselves and be educated at the same time, that knowledge is very, very crucial. Young people bring a lot of knowledge to the table. Elders bring a lot of knowledge to the table. So we need to share and learn from each other. And so that's been a very, very important piece. And so that intersectedness between doing that is the old saying is the saying is that we don't know where we came from, then we may not know where we are, and we may not know where we should be going together. And it's going to take our children, youth, our adults, and our elders coming together and consistently opening up those lines of communication. So that's very, very important. And we spend a lot of time for those that visit Los Jardines and some of our other projects and campaigns that we have throughout the country, know that youth are not just a lip service piece to this, but on the other side, that we need to integrate our organizations to make it intergenerational.
And Richard, as we look at where we're at now in this moment of advocacy around environmental justice, what does the future 1 year, 3 years, 5 years of environmental justice advocacy look like to you? And what is your hope for where we'll be at the end of that period?
Well, again, thank you. Thank you for that. That's why I think a part of it is, and I just will quickly say again that we can't allow ourselves to be pitted against each other. That's very, very crucial. And I think the other piece, and I'm not here speaking for the WEJAC, although I do co-chair the White House Council. But there's been incredible pieces of work that have been done over the last couple of months, through the WEJAC Council. Let's remember what month this is, and then remember that the WEJAC has only been together for a very short period of time. So we've been looking at climate and economic justice screening tools. We've been looking at scorecards. We made recommendations on Justice 40. The president's supposed to be coming out with an executive order on environmental justice that we've been engaged in making recommendations about throughout this country. So I think those are some of the pieces. But I think the other side, sometimes we don't celebrate enough because we've had significant victories. If you look at Justice 40, for an example, the interim guidance that now has been put out to some of the federal agencies, a good percentage of the recommendations that were made by the WEJAC Council in consultation from the bottom up are included in that interim guidance as they move forward to a final guidance. So I'm just using there a couple of examples. Where do we go in the future? The future is in our hands. The WEJAC Council is not the government's council, it's the people's council, because we asked for a place at the table within the White House, at the highest level of the White House. And so I say that sincerely, that many get confused sometimes because the WEJAC belongs to the people that created it. And that's our people that helped to create that. So let's celebrate our victories. Let's sit at the table and discuss issues that we can agree upon. And in many cases, issues that we may not agree upon, but why are we not agreeing on them? So at least we know someday that, oh, well, we don't support each other on these issues. That's very, very, very important, because I hear sometimes, oh, well, we can't, the Los Jardines or EJHA or whoever it may be. And the other piece is the inclusion of workers. Workers, if we're talking about bottom-up process, then we need to not only be engaging with workers inside those facilities on a consistent basis, but supporting each other in our struggles at the same time. So I think to help make our communities a better place for us to work, live, play, pray, and go to school, then it's necessary then that we continue to engage in these discussions, Chris.
Excellent, Richard. And Richard, Pablo Ortiz Partida has a question that you and I have spoken about over the years, and I'm sure many participating in this forum also wonder about. And the question is this: can you share with us how you've managed to stay hopeful over the course of the years that you've been working on these issues? what's your advice for people who only have a few years in the EJ space and feel burned out? How do we keep our spirits moving forward? How do we keep from burning out ourselves in our efforts to advance these issues?
Well, again, Pablo, thank you. Thank you for that question. I have to think about that every day, at night when I go to sleep, and in the morning when I wake up. And that's what some would say. I come out of the youth movement in regards to our primary piece has really been about, and our one of our primary themes within the group that I came from was to serve, educate, and defend our people. And we created programs to be able to do that. We created cultural schools for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. We opened up the first health clinic here, community-run health clinic in Albuquerque. We opened up the first wood cooperative, collective wood cooperative, and worked with our elders and those that are heating by firewood and cooking by firewood. So, I mean, I think it's that just some days, we got good days like everyone else, or I do, and sometimes not so good days, and so one of the things that keeps me is that I know and I believe that if we do it together, that we can gain additional successes, not only for our communities, but for our people in general. And I've got to hold that to my heart. We've lost too many people that have given up their lives, as I said, to make it possible for us to be here. And I just will say this too, is that it's the hope of our young people. No? When I say that, I'm talking about our children. Sometimes for me, if I go to the grocery store or whatever, and we're wearing masks and these kind of things, and somebody's looking at me and I see they're kind of like staring at me and I don't want to stare at them. But then they'll say, Richard, you may not remember us, but I was 6 years old when you all opened up the first cultural schools, 5 cultural schools in Albuquerque in different locations throughout the city. And we just wanted to thank you very much. And I would say back to them, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I will take that message back to those that are still with us. And I say that because it's those things. It's a smile on the face sometimes. It's our people that are holding incredible information and knowledge, that we lift up that knowledge of our people and so on. And so it's those and celebration is crucial to that. Let's continue to sing together, and let's continue to do theatro, and let's continue to do all of the things that our movements have been based on. But I will say at the end of the day, it's the belief that at the end of the day for us, it's about, as we always say, for the love of the people always. And if we keep practicing what we say we preach, if we keep learning and sharing, I think we can make our communities a better place for us to live, our cities for a better place for us to live, our state a better place to live, our regions, our country, and the world. And let's never forget the intersections from the internationalism and how international is connected to our local issues.
I think that's right. The late Representative John Lewis used to call it the beloved community. And I think what I hear you saying is we take strength from each other as a community. Richard, I really want to thank you for spending the time with us today, for sharing your wisdom with us, for engaging in this conversation. I want to offer you the floor for the next 5 minutes to share with us some closing thoughts, some inspiration on how we move forward. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, again, I just would like to say and thank the leadership of the Green Latinos, and just extend our continued offers to sit at the table and have discussions about how we can be supportive of each other, and in many cases how we can together assist in building movement. The other I would say is the conservation piece, because Secretary Deb, or Sister Deb, as we call her here in New Mexico, That conservation is very, very crucial. And I see up here because an extended invitation to those that are listening, to come if you're ever in Albuquerque, if you're visiting, and then please contact us here at Los Adinas Institute so we can do some exchange. And I say this on the conservation side because also we are holding within the only park refuge in the United States or its territories, the only federal refuge that has an environmental and economic justice strategy attached to it. And that's the Valle de Oro National Wildlife Refuge. I would encourage people that are looking and engaging in conservation issues to look at. It's the only strategic plan from an environmental and economic justice standpoint in the country. So that's very crucial. And lastly, sisters and brothers, we can do it, but we've got to do it together. It's got to be done together. And any victories that we've had throughout the years, from our opinion, have been because we've come together and unified ourselves to maintain those goals and to final victory. So again, Chris, thank you to yourself. Thank you to the staff. Thank you to our sisters and brothers. And truly, let's work together to not only make our country a better place for us to live, but for work together to make our world a better place for us to live. So thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you so much, Richard, for spending the time with us. And thank you all for joining us in this conversation. Now I'll hand it back to Mariana to continue our program. Thank you all.